this is your host, Julia Napini. I am a clinical and forensic social worker who owns a counseling practice and a consulting business. In this show, we discuss the challenges of being successful in business while maintaining your integrity and staying true to yourself. Join me while I interview other professionals and share insights from life and experience. Let's talk about RingRx, our latest sponsor. RingRx is a high-quality, HIPAA-compliant telephone, text, and fax communications platform. They provide seamless, cost-effective communications for behavioral therapists, medical practices, hospitals, and other healthcare providers. RingRx is designed for modern healthcare environments. They offer customizable features like a phone app, automated patient outreach, voicemail, after-hours call routing, and top-quality desk phones. Try RingRx for free today at ringrx.com. And if you sign up using the code CLIMB, you'll get 15% off your monthly bill forever. Conditions apply. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Compassionate Climb podcast. Our guest today specializes in working with teens, and I cannot wait to pick her brain, learn more about this specialty, and I can see this being really helpful to those of us out there that are doing this work, maybe potentially some group practice owners like myself who are always looking to hire and meet this need, and it is tough. So let's learn about her career climb. Charity Chaffee, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so jazzed to be here, and I've had far too much coffee to prove it. So,
all right. Well, we are in the same boat. You were actually the last appointment that I had, like the last thing in my calendar of the day. So you're getting like the culmination of everything that today entailed.
Perfect. I love it. I'm here for it. Let's be chaos.
Yeah. So share anything with the audience that would be helpful to set us up for this conversation, how this became a specialty of yours, and the process of making the decision to start your own practice and what that journey's look like.
Yeah, so I will try to condense this into something manageable. So I actually went to school to become a biology teacher. That was my original thing, yes. And then I graduated, absolutely panicked, and was like, I actually don't want to do this at all. But at that point, I was 5 years into that degree. I was a dual major, dual minor. I had already done my teaching stuff, was like set to go, and was like, nope, not it, don't want it. And I had one person in my life who was like, you would actually make a really great therapist. And I was like, you think? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, bet. 3 days later, I applied to the program. I sat for my GREs. I got into the program having I took a psych class in undergrad, and that was it. But I had a very well-rounded background in terms of like life and whatever. So got into the program. I've never looked back. So I think that me becoming a therapist was the best impulse decision I've ever made. And I will stand on that. I would never choose another career for myself. But my whole trajectory, I actually didn't want to work with teens at all. I wanted to work with adults. I wanted to work with women with borderline because I felt like that was something that I was curious about, that I was like, oh, maybe I could make a difference in that. Ended up with my first 2 adult women with borderline and was like, nope, not it. And very much was like, I'm not the person to treat this. There are people out there that are passionate about working with them. It was not me. I was not equipped with that skill set. So I had a supervisor at that point who was like, hey, what about this teenager who's fired 35 of our clinicians and is like very resistant and like, very grandiose and provocative in her statements. And I was like sold. And I was terrified because I had no idea what I was walking into, but it became essentially the groundwork and the foundation for what I do now, which is working with high-risk teens. And my 95% of my career has been dedicated to working with teens in various levels of care. So residential, I was a behavioral health director. I worked at short-term assessment programs, CBAT, you name it, I've done it. And then I got to the point where I just was like, I have a lot of experience. I want to be able to work with people that I want to work with and that I'm choosing and, in the way that I want to do it, because I conceptualize my practice in a very teen focused way, which is not the norm when we're talking about like therapy. And a lot of people kind of like pin teenagers into either child and teen or teen and adults. And I'm like, no, teens are their own specialty. So I went out on my own and was absolutely terrified, started very part-time when I was working residential and just kind of slowly added up from there to the point where by the time I left my residential job, I was essentially having 2 full-time jobs. So there was almost no lapse for me in like financial stuff or whatever. And I've just continued to grow from there. So scariest decision I've ever made was becoming a therapist, best decision ultimately. But then I'm here working with the people I want to work with in my own intensity, in my own way. So it's been a really beautiful experience, but nothing that I would have predicted had you asked me at like 18.
That was a great synopsis. I feel like you provided a really good overview there pretty succinctly. But what's fascinating to me about that is that for someone who is so sure that this is their niche, and you said 75% is this population, that you had previous times in your life where you seemed to be really sure about the direction and pivoted, and here you are now. So what do you think is contributing to this specialty area and the longevity that you've had? I'm assuming because you're really good at it, but beyond that, what else is contributing?
I mean, so my dad was a dentist, which is an important kind of part of my story because I watched my parents become entrepreneurs, and hate it. I just don't think that they liked the business aspect. They didn't like a lot of those pieces. And when we're in grad school, they don't teach us anything about business, right? When we're doing counseling and everything like that. And so for me, I literally was like, that's the last thing I want to do is be in a room all day talking to people. And now I'm here being in a room all day talking to people, which is very interesting. But I for a lot of my journey, it's been gut instinct and following like, is this something that I can throw myself into and be really passionate about? And teens are just my people. It doesn't feel like work. It feels like I'm sitting and I'm talking with someone who is like so open and willing and honest and like messy in their own way. And so for me, working 30 hours a week, I'm just like, what work? This doesn't feel like work. This just feels like I'm doing the thing that I was meant to do. And the part of that too is I was your high risk teenager. I went through a lot of my own chaos. I didn't have a lot of guidance. I was like really trying to find myself. And so for me, I remember saying to my high school guidance counselor, I was like, there must be a purpose for everything that I'm going through right now. And I have just believed that long term of like, there has to be something that I'm building to. And then when I got to the point where I was like officially a therapist, I was like, this is it. This has been my calling. And so it just feels so natural. It doesn't feel like work. There's no burnout there. I'm like, I meet with kids and my teens and I'm so energized after it. I'm just like, yes, like this is the spice. And so I think for me, it's the passion, it's the natural kind of inclination towards it. So I don't feel like I'm forcing myself to fit into a hole that wasn't meant for me.
Yeah. Well, that really is the dream, right? Work that doesn't truly feel like work. So for those of us out there that are business owners, we know that there are some aspects of it that aren't the most enjoyable that are still required. So I definitely want to go there and talk about that a little bit. In addition to a lot of the feedback that I get from other therapists that I know and that work in my group practice in terms of the reasons why they might be hesitant to work with this population, or especially multiple clients that are in this age group. So let's start with the business side. So your decision to start your own practice, what did that look like? And how did you navigate some of those pieces that you didn't learn about beforehand, were really new, and required for you to set yourself up for success?
Yeah. I think private practice felt very mysterious to me when I was first starting out. It seemed like there were so many things you had to have in place. And I was very hesitant, kind of scared, fearful, because I was like, what if I mess up? What if whatever? And honestly, one day I just was ready to rip off the Band-Aid. And I was like, let's just try it, right? Like I wasn't signing up for anything at that point, except for the experience and the exposure of like, what if, right? So I actually started out, I didn't want to take insurance because I was like, that seems painful. And so I didn't want to do that. And so I decided that I was at that point in time working at a community service agency. And so I was making $30 an hour for an hour of therapy. And I was like, great, I'm just going to charge $30 an hour. I'm going to get my Psychology Today profile. I'm going to print this generic paperwork from online and edit it for whatever I need to. And I'm just going to jump in. And for me, it was that idea of like, I don't have to commit to this long term. I don't have to be this forever, but I want to try it and figure out if that is something that like could fit for me. And very quickly from there, I started meeting other professionals that were private practice people that had been there private pay for years that were essentially being like, come on in, the water is fine. And that motivation, that encouragement meant so much because there's a lot of people that are naysayers that are like, you can't do this. It's not going to be successful. What are you going to do if this happens? But honestly, when you're doing your own private practice, when you're doing the entrepreneurial journey, there are just things you commit to. There are just things that come with that journey that you can't necessarily navigate around. You just have to figure out how you're going to deal with them as your solo practice.
Mm-hmm. Well, clearly you did a lot right to still be successful at it and feeling the way that you do and not experiencing burnout. So that's fantastic. So one of the things that I hear so frequently from therapists is that when they're working with teens, number one, especially high risk teens, right? Yeah. Very oftentimes they're not just working with them in isolation. There are their parents that are not maybe always following through with a lot of what's happening in therapy. There might be other providers that you need to coordinate with. So it tends to feel like a lot more work for them and the risk is a lot higher. What would you say to that?
I think that's true. I think when you're dealing with children and teens, there is to some extent a higher or maybe different level of intensity with risk. And I think that is something that you have to be ready for. And a lot of people, when we're talking about teen treatment, the reason people flounder isn't necessarily because they're incapable. It's because they don't have the right structure for incorporating parents and understanding the family dynamic and really progressing in treatment. When I talk to people all the time, the first response is like, God bless you, I could never work with the parents. And I can understand that sentiment, but I also think that it's really sad to me because you have parents, so many parents who are so committed and want to try and want to understand and want to be included in that, but we have to show them how. And that's part of our responsibility. And the hill I will die on is I think teens are a specialty that you should be trained in. I don't think that I think there are really well-intentioned people that want to work with teens that don't understand potential damage that they're doing by not incorporating parents, by not really taking the environment into consideration, by not being prepped, right? Like you could have a teen that walks into therapy that's just struggling with anxiety, right? And then 6 months later, you have a teen who's actively cutting, who's exploring eating disorder behaviors, who's been in and out of hospitals 2 or 3 times, right? And so we can accept that in the beginning, they didn't look like they were high risk, but any teen has the opportunity to be high risk, right? Mm-hmm. And we as a society, as a culture, as training programs often don't give enough emphasis or considerations for like, what does that look like when we find ourselves in those situations that we didn't necessarily start out with? So a lot of people are like, don't want to work with teens because the parents, don't want to work with teens because they're not going to listen to me. And I'm like, yeah, but that's half the fun of it. Right? Is like trying to figure out how to navigate this like, wild sense of self in some ways and trying to hone it and really add like value and understanding to it. And then to bring the parents into that to help them understand. It's such a beautiful process. And I think when you get to see it beginning to end, it's like, oh, yes, that is the work. That is why I do it. But I think a lot of people that don't want to work with teens or that try it and flounder, they don't have the right support. They don't have the right structure. They don't have the right know-how and kind of like intuition. I'm very grateful that my first supervisor was fantastic and really was like, just helped me develop all of this stuff that I felt in my body, but I didn't necessarily know how to convey in session. And like, it's just been an uphill, like learning experience from then.
Okay. Well, that's really positive and optimistic. So what about those instances where you might have a parent that is a little bit less involved, or when you do try to integrate them and despite your best efforts to be clear about what your process looks like and you're trying to engage them and there's clearly a need for them to be present and have an idea of what's going on and some follow through, and that's a struggle for whatever reason, or a lot of times they might be unintentionally exacerbating the problem. What are some suggestions that you have for the clinicians that are in that situation and having a hard time?
Yeah. I love this question because I think it's like so common. And I have people that I've worked with where parents weren't ever really able to get on board in the way that I needed them to, or the way that their kid needed them to. But all we can do is continue to try. And so I think like in a lot of these cases, you might have one or two failed, case consultations. You might have one or two failed training sessions. You might have that experience of like, oh, this parent doesn't care, right? But I would really encourage people to look outside of that and to understand that any behavior is communication, right? And to really help them not just focus on their kid in that session, but they might need time to understand why there's some resistance there, right? Mm-hmm. And even though we're not their therapist, their internal experiences are directly impacting that of our clients. And so we can't sit there and just ignore it the way that we'd be like, oh, you just have to parent this way, right? Parenting comes from our shared experiences. Parenting comes from our life. We have to kind of understand all of those pieces in coordination with like, what is your teenager experiencing, right? And there has to be a level of accountability there. And sometimes that is really hard for parents. And I've definitely had parents tell me to go F myself because they're like, that's not true, right? It happens. It happens. Mm-hmm. People are allowed to have those reactions, but we talk about it, right? And I think part of me as a therapist is I'm never going to back down. And those conversations aren't going to make me feel despondent or bad at my job. It just shows me that I'm headed in the right direction and that there's something that I hit on that is so uncomfortable that like we need to talk about it more. And it might be a process for 6 months, right? But I think it's like the more you can show up for that kid and the more you can advocate in a way that makes sense, the parent is eventually going to see that and be like, oh, like we actually have the same goal here. Like we want this kid to be successful. And it's like, yeah, I'm not against you. Right. And I think when you're having those case consultations, you're having that time with the parent, you're building that collaboration. It's so important to like also see them as a person outside of just seeing them as a parent.
Yes, I can definitely see the value in that for sure. I think another component is just the nature of the work itself. And so with us kind of being given that limited time to work with someone, and I mean, I think maybe it's a little bit different. You said you don't take insurance, right?
Right.
So we're always very mindful of what the insurance requires and the time spent in session and the things that we're able to bill for and the things that we aren't. I wonder how much of a component that is, as opposed to just being really clear out the gate. This is my rate. This is what you can expect. And then maybe not having that be as much of a component. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think the way you structure your practice should definitely be around like the way you want to do the work and the way that you're more successful with it. But I also think that parents don't know what they don't know the same way that we don't know what we don't know. And so there are so many ways you can kind of incorporate the skills training, that you can incorporate like that family regulation piece that you don't even necessarily need to like bill the insurance for, right? Family therapy sessions exist for a reason. You can use that as kind of a training session of like, we're just going to focus on this skill and we're not going to bring up all these other pieces that are happening right now, right? Then there's a piece where I have a lot of parents that are absolutely willing to pay for the different services that are going to bring value to that like work. So even if it's like, hey, we can do these like parent training, these parent skill sessions at a lower rate that are like out of pocket, you're going to get parents are going to want to do that because they want to showcase that they're willing to do the work alongside their teen. So I think like that's the business piece, is being able to think really creatively about how we're offering services and who they're offering to and how we're like kind of getting them embedded in the treatment. And it doesn't have to just be a straight up like, can I bill for this or can't I? Right. There's a lot of groups that exist. Insurance may or may not cover groups. Insurance may or may not cover like couples counseling. Right. But people do it anyway because they see the value in it. And so like that is part of, I think, when you're building a team focused private practice, is really understanding like, what do parents actually need that either they're willing to like pay for or that they're willing to like embed the time.
Yeah. We experience a lot of challenges to both of those, but those are really good things for us to be mindful of. So as far as you making the choice to have this be your specialty and your primary focus, for a lot of people that we speak to, I find there is, I would say, a pretty high rate of entrepreneurs that end up diagnosed with ADHD, or we identify as multi-passionate, or we want to go in all these different directions. And I could see how you could have a whole schedule of teens in one day, and each session you are walking into kind of your own version of, okay, what am I in for here? So I can see how it can be really dynamic. But what would you say to how you've been able to feel really fulfilled doing this work and specializing in that one population?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I walk into 8 different sessions and I have 8 different situations like, coming at me. And it could be, there was a breakup, there was a fight with friends, I'm in a new relationship, I hate my mom, right? There's all these kind of components that come up. And it's really cool because it does allow for lots of different variety during the day. And so I get to be a lot of different types of people, right? A lot of different clinicians, and I get to showcase a lot of skills throughout that day, which is really fun. But I think for me, really like throughout the work, it's always been about stabilizing step 1 and then adding in step 2 and step 3 and step 4. Because you can't really work on step 4 and 5 in these multi-passionate pieces if your ground floor is like unstable. So I have spent the last like 5 or 6 years building my private practice and really focusing on my policies and my procedures and my practices and how I'm conceptualizing things and how I'm offering these different services. And I've just recently added in like supervising and consulting and public speaking and doing all these other pieces that I'm super excited about, but they build off of all of the things that I have spent the last 15 years working on. And so it's fun in that way, but it's not me building a new repertoire of like language and understanding or a skill set. It's just being able to teach that skill set to other people that would also be helpful. So I think the part we get stuck in with ADHD, especially as an entrepreneur, is that we want to do so many things and everything feels like fun and exciting and shiny, but we have to also measure the effort that's going to go into that and like really be honest with ourselves about the time commitment. And maybe we don't know about the time commitment when we bite something off and we just can't really chew it. But I think that's a piece too that I really love and appreciate is that kind of consistent assessment. And I think any good business owner is going to be continually assessing their referral rates and their flows and their practices. And like once a month, you're just going to sit and think about it, jot some stuff down, figure out where the barriers are, where the loops are, what's working and what's not. Because when we own our own business, we're our own boss. Right. And
Totally.
we have to be so good about managing that and having that conversation with ourselves so that we can kind of continually learn and grow. And that way I'm not resentful in a year because of like X, Y, and Z decision, right? It's like, no, I made that decision. So like I can't, resentfulness is not the right emotion in that situation. It's like, I feel I should have made something different. So maybe it's regret and maybe it's shifting me to be like, I need to make this decision going forward.
So it sounds like you were very conscientious in building that solid foundation in your practice and feeling really good about that before it was kind of this launch pad into other things that are still similar and in the same ballpark, but do enable you to increase your impact and share a lot of what you've learned with other people. So share more about what that looks like for you. What did you start with in terms of diversifying and what does that look like now?
So I, as someone who's a teen-focused therapist, I've been thinking so much about different services and kind of who I would want to offer them to and what they would look like. And I allowed myself to kind of dabble around in different pieces. So I did some parenting workshops. I did, some kind of co-collaboration workshops, which were a lot of fun. But for me, I've never played small. And I think that's the thing that I had to remind myself is that like, I'm not in this just to be like, tee-hee, this is fun. I'm in this to like, not only just to create something badass, but also to create a legacy and to make sure that I'm helping the field move forward in a progressive way. And then I'm offering this kind of like pressure to kind of continue to develop and grow and learn. And so for me, the parenting stuff didn't really land the way I wanted it to. Like I didn't have the feeling that I was looking for when I was done doing some of that. And I still really enjoy it, but I realized that one of the things that I really am in love with is helping to support clinicians in the field that want to work with teens, but maybe don't have the skill set or want to work with teens, but want to deeply be connected to that, or maybe work with some teens, but don't love the work, but I want to help them find a way to do that. We need more competent teen providers. And so I've really fallen in love with that space of just like consultation and supervision. And I'm building Teens Uncharted at this point, which is all about helping clinicians with training and support and community that want to work with teens. Because I was part of a lot of consultation groups and like they're really great and the people are lovely and I have nothing against them. But I think sometimes when I'm sitting and talking about a high-risk teen, they're like, isn't that just like manipulative? And it's like, no, not really. That's not like the vibe. So I feel like it's kind of hard to get good case consultation when people aren't like actively working with teens. So that's really where it created was like, let's do some group consultation around teens. Let's do some like teen focused private practice building, because the way that I've structured my practice, totally different from the way that other people have theirs. I mean, it takes every kind to go around, so it's totally fine. But I think for me, it works.
So tell us more about the structure. So you've kind of talked about your model and how you've set things up and that being different. So what does that look like in comparison to maybe some other people that you've spoken to and seen their practices and how it's different?
Great. So I think we've been fed a lie as a society that we're only productive between like 5 and noon or like 9 and 5. And for me, like I when I work with teenagers who are getting kind of routinely yelled at or scolded because they're like, you should be in bed and you should be doing this and this isn't the time to do that. It brings me back to kind of my own functioning as a teenager, where it's like, I've always been kind of a night owl. I've always been more of a second shift awake person. And I don't love the idea of doing therapy with teens between 9 and 5, because I'm asking them to do a lot of things above and beyond of what they're already asked to do that day. So for me, when I started, I was like, I don't want to ask a teenager to miss something just to access therapy. That didn't feel fair, because we're already asking a lot of them as a society, right? So for me, that meant that I structured my kind of nights and weekends around working with them. So I don't typically start my day job until like 3:00. And so I work like 3 to 10. I have some Saturday hours that I work. And I really wanted to be flexible with their life, because that is what's happening. They have soccer games, they have swim meets, they have band practice. They want to go hang out with their boyfriend. I get you, right? If I can offer the flexibility, I will, because again, I want therapy to be accessible and something that they don't feel like they have to choose between different things just to get treatment. And that led me into this other space where you had a lot of professionals who are like, how could you do sessions at 8:00 at night? Aren't you exhausted? And I know that we don't necessarily all have the same 24 hours in a day, but we all have 24 hours, right? And it's wild to me, as a society, we will sit there and we will praise and prioritize and be like, oh my God, you're so amazing and successful because you wake up at 5:00 in the morning. But if I decide to work from 3 to 10 and then go to the gym at midnight, I'm somehow looked at in a negative way because I'm irresponsible and I should be in bed and I should be asleep, right? So a big part of my practice, I've always been a rebel, I will always be a rebel, is like offering these services at times that make sense for the people and that also fit like myself and my life. And so, you know, there are people that are like, oh, well, like, when do you go to the doctor? When do you do this? When do you do that? And it's like, if I think about other fields, I think about police officers and nurses and doctors and all the other people, mental health folks that work at group homes and residential care, right? We're on 24 hours a day, right? So I feel like my schedule is no different than working second shift at the ER as a trauma surgeon. Right. And there are doctors that work 120 hours a week doing all the different things they do. And I'm at like 35 and people are like, you're working too much. You're going to burn yourself out. Like I get a lot of like judgment for that. But the way that I run my practice and the people that I work with, I have the capacity for. And that's the other piece I think is so important when you're assessing onboarding of a new client, is actually talking about like, do I have the capacity, right, to manage this client from baseline where they're at now to potential crisis, right? Because it happens, right? Do I have the time to add in the IEP meetings, the parent consultations, the parent trainings, like all the other pieces are going to happen, right? But I do that. I meet with parents during the day often, and then I meet with the kids at night, and I do some weekend hours to accommodate anyone who can't meet during the week. And I work 3 to 10, and it's great. I work out at midnight, and people are like, wow, you're like, that's crazy. And I was like, yeah, but isn't it nuts to wake up at 4:00 in the morning and go to CrossFit? Like, why is that a judgment? But like, yeah, so I don't get it. And for me in my head, I'm like, I have 24 hours and I can use those in the ways that I see fit. And I think that has been part of getting out of this like classic entrepreneurial mindset, is like, I don't have to work 9 to 5. I don't.
I love it. I appreciate you sharing that. I think it's great that you found something that not only works for you in your own life and your own structure and schedule, but also really works with this population so well. I'm sure it's very much appreciated that your clients can prioritize the things that are really going to enhance their well-being and allow them to practice a lot of what you're talking about and really bring them joy and not feel like they have to make a choice or sacrifice. And, you know, just that accommodation, it works better for parents. It works better for the clients. So, and that you're still able to have a life and structure other things around that. So do you find that you have the propensity to maybe overwork now because you have these relationships established with your caseload and you're starting to expand and have this other venture and adding in some speaking and some additional trainings? What are some of the rules that you have for yourself to maintain what it sounds like you're at, which is being really aware of what your own needs are, and you're not talking about feeling burnt out, which is incredible. So what contributes to that?
Yeah. So I think for me, when I had first decided on Teens Uncharted, I had a lot of anxiety because I was like, oh, I need to get this out. I need to get it launched. But the thing that I am continually reminding myself is that I'm not in a race with anybody else, right? For my practice, for my life, for the projects that I create, the companies that I build, I'm not in a race. There is no deadline. The deadlines that I set for different things are deadlines I set for myself, taking into consideration the things that I need to do during that week. And even if someone is building something similar or has built something similar, they're not building it the way that I am building it, right? We all have different lenses for that. And so I think it's like, there's like a uniqueness in that where it's like I'm building something that nobody else is going to build the way that I'm going to build it. And like I think that creates a little bit of safety and security for me in terms of like, yeah, I can put that off until next week if it's not necessarily a priority, right? So I think that's one piece I just remind myself of. And I think the other thing is that, I have like time blocked off of my schedule. I have really, really pushed myself over the last year to make sure that I have consistency in the things that I like to do. So I like to do CrossFit. I like to Olympic lift. I own a horse and I love to go and like work with my horse. And so those are things that are like non-negotiable for me, right? So it's not like, oh, I'll skip my horseback riding today. No, every Monday, right? I am here doing this thing. And I was like laughing last week because I had a parent who was like, can you talk Monday at this time? And I was like, I will talk to you, but I will be on a horse.
That's a great visual. Yeah. And such a good, concrete, tangible, where we all say that, but I think, as you're providing a little bit more insight into the things that really help you to maintain this, it's so helpful. And then also the people that you work with know that. And like you said, I love the piece about not being in a race with anybody. You're the one that sets the timeline. You're the one that sets the expectation. You're not doing this for anybody else. You're already having an impact. You're helping people. If you can just expand that, all the better, but you want to be your best self when you're doing that. So these are some really great messages. So do you have anything that you're currently working on that you would like to share with the audience so that they can check it out? What's the best way for people to follow you, learn more about this other business?
Yeah. So so Teens Uncharted is all around supporting clinicians in working with teens and high-risk teens. And so I have some really exciting things up and coming for that, which I'm stoked about. One of those is actually a harm reduction training that I'm working on. I practice from a harm reduction lens because I feel like it really kind of fits with like where a lot of teenagers are at. And it helps really provide the scaffolding for future decision making. And it helps this space of collaboration instead of being like, I'm the boss. It's kind of like we are collaborating, we're getting information together, we are like working on helping you make these decisions for yourself. So that's going to be an 8-week training that I'm really stoked about. It's going to be 12 CEUs that I've applied for. And then there's also another one that I love so much. It's called Vicariously Teen. And it's a training for people who don't work with teens, but who work with people who have teens in their life. And so for me, that's kind of like I get some consistent narratives with like adult therapists where I have a parent who's like, my therapist told me my child is just manipulating me. And it's like, that's not a helpful narrative to like support. So like, I want to give some different context to that and to give some skills to people who don't work with teens and don't want to, but work with like the parents, the teachers, different folks. And then the thing that I'm most excited about is that I'm actually launching a 12-month fellowship program in September. That's going to be a very high touch, essentially teen training program. So it's for clinicians who are really dedicated. They want the really deep work. It's going to be a lot of different CEUs and content, but it's going to be a clinical focus with some business built-in lens of talking about how we can build practices that really feel fulfilling and sustainable and ethical etc., around who you are as a person and your lifestyle and the things you want. So really, really excited about those three pieces. I also have a podcast where I talk a lot about teens in treatment. It's called Teens No Cap, which you can look it up on YouTube and all the podcasting stuff. And then my website, teensuncharted.com, has a lot of good information. But I'm also happy to like chat with anybody anytime and network and, get to know you and what your needs are. Because I also have a community on School, which is all focused on helping create that community of people who are like, I work with teens and I'm a unicorn in my state. I don't want anyone to feel they're alone in working with teenagers. And there should always be someone there who's like, I get you.
I agree. I mean, your enthusiasm for it is infectious. So my biggest takeaway from this episode is that you are potentially limiting yourself if you are feeling that aversion to working with this population and getting trained and developing the experience and the skill set can be really invaluable. And it doesn't necessarily have to just be with the teens itself. It can even help you in the work that you're doing with parents or those that are working with them. So anything else that you want to leave the audience with today?
Really just like follow your gut. I think I think that we have been taught that you can build business in one way. And I think there are so many different ways you can build business that feels really good and build practices that feel really good and sustaining. And, I was just talking to someone the other day about something that someone had said to me, and they're like, I literally was like retracting in my seat when you told me that. And I was like, I know, same. Because when you're in touch with that internal instinct, you get a better sense for like what you want to offer and why. And it's okay to be confident. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to explore things and have them not be the right fit.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're such a great example of all of that. I so appreciate you highlighting how that's played out in your own life in the episode today. So thank you for the work that you're doing and everything you shared today.
Yes, thanks so much for having me. I could talk teen all day. So if anyone is listening, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm more than happy to connect and provide any information and insight and support I can. And if there's something that doesn't exist that you want to exist in the teen world, I want to help create it. So
awesome. Thank you. If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. This will help others find us and benefit as well. The Compassionate Climb podcast represents the opinions of Julia Napini and her guests. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. If that is what you are seeking, please consult an attorney.